Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I am Lydia Thompson. I am a licensed professional counselor in Franklin, Tennessee. I work primarily with teenagers and their families, but I love talking about mental health topics. So when I was thinking about what to name this podcast, it's such a big responsibility. I thought about this memory I had. I was out at a bar with some friends and we were joking around. I like to poke fun at people. I was having a great time. And somebody in the group didn't know that I was a counselor. And they looked at me with judgment and they said, "Oh, you're a counselor?" And I feel a lot of judgment sometimes about that label, counselor. I feel like, of course, I'm a counselor, but I am off the clock. I am allowed to be a person too. So that is the essence of this podcast. I get to be off the clock and talking about mental health topics. I think there are some misconceptions about who a counselor is. Often when I meet people, they're either on the side of, "Oh my gosh, you're judging me," which I'm like, I'm not. Or it's like, "Let me tell you my childhood trauma." So I think there are some misconceptions about what counselors are, that they have to be nodding and quiet and maybe even a blank slate. And that's not how I show up in the room, and that's not how I show up in my life. I was actually talking to my husband this morning that when he says that I'm a counselor, there is this almost prickly reaction of, "Oh, she thinks that she's better than everybody else. I am just like you." And he corrects people like, "Nope, she's not on all the time. She gets to be off the clock." And often when I even meet other counselors out in the wild, some of them tend to be on. And there's a disconnect for me for somebody who is on, that they're not super fun to be around. I mean, not judging. It's just some counselors tend to be serious. Counseling doesn't have to be serious all the time. And counselors don't have to be serious all the time. Counselors don't have to be anything. I just get to be me. Off the clock for me just means that I get to be myself. I love talking about mental health, and I love talking about deep stuff with my friends and with the other counselors at my practice. And I want to bring you into a more accessible mental health conversation. When I listen to other mental health podcasts or self-help podcasts, it's often on these two sides of things. It's either like the TikTok tips that are 30 seconds long, and it's, "This is going to change your life," is this 30-second TikTok tip. Or it is like TED Talks about generational trauma, or an expert who wrote a book on a podcast. And my goal is to be somewhere in the middle. I do not claim to be a book or book writing expert about anything. I don't think I could even give a TED Talk about anything. But I do have a lot of experience working with other people and families, teenagers, kids, and people of all places. So this isn't going to be about us teaching you what you have to do in order to change your life. I hope that when you listen to this, you can feel a little bit less alone. Like you're joining in with a group of friends, talking about mental health and sharing stories, what works, what doesn't work. This is for the people who take a few deep breaths right before they have their glass of wine. A little bit about me. I am a Nashville native, which is very rare. If you're listening from Tennessee, you know a Nashville native is pretty rare. I started off wanting to be a play therapist and wanted to work with little kids. And when I got into practice, I really loved, I actually really hated at first working with teenagers, but that's what kept showing up was teenagers. And I even told my husband, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I could take a single teenager more." And at some point something switched for me, and I really loved the challenge of working with teenagers. I looked forward to our sessions because they tested me and I got to earn trust. I also got to show up more authentically, because when I was on and therapist-y and trying to therapize them, they tended to shut down. And when I showed up more authentically, they started to open up. And I got to reshape their expectations of what therapy should and shouldn't be. I knew I wanted to be a therapist around 18 years old. I was doing all of these like missions, and I was around people like my friends who really wanted help, and they came to me for help. And maybe you're relating to this, that you're the therapist friend. I was the therapist friend who would coach people and try to fix problems for them. And really at the end of the day, I kept coming up short because I didn't have the tools. I could hold babies, I could make people laugh, I could give them a hug, I could even give them a bit of my advice, but ultimately I kept coming up short when it came to the big issues. And I tried my best because I really cared, but ultimately, I know this sounds cliche, but I just wanted to help people. And so I decided that I wanted to become a therapist. My grandmother is a therapist, and at first I thought, like, I can't do this. I can't go and help people like this. I'm glad I faced that because I feel that I am making a difference in the world. When I was younger, I would feel the depth of the struggles of the world, and somehow felt responsible for others. I feel like I can sleep at night and feel good about the darkness of the world, knowing that I am making a difference in people's lives every single day. Becoming a counselor has changed fundamentally who I am and my DNA. It's actually given me a lot more confidence, and I can trust my intuition. I finally get to ask the invasive questions that I wonder inside, but now I just get to say it out loud and it's not inappropriate. I get to also follow my curiosities. I like to trust my judgment and follow wherever my curiosities are. Part of this podcast is going to be about just being present and following curiosities and following the conversation wherever it goes. And that's kind of the vibe of my therapy sessions as well. Some random facts about me. In high school and after high school, I did theater and improv. I did speech and debate. It's called forensics. I was a nationally ranked forensics person. I just had a baby about 3.5 months ago. That's an important part of who I am right now. And I'm sure some random facts will come up about me too. So why start a podcast? I love to hear myself talk. That's why. A lot of mental health topics tend to be too simplified or too specialized. I wanted to give a place that's in the middle, that is mental health professionals and who knows who else talking about topics that maybe they're not experts on. None of us have written a book. I mean, who knows who I'm going to have on this podcast, but none of us that I know has written a book or is an expert on any topic. We're just people. And counselors are just people, ultimately. This podcast is to make mental health topics more accessible and normal. Ultimately, who I was thinking about when I was thinking about making a podcast is self-help fanatics, the people who are always searching for growth and are go, go, go. They listen to the mental health podcasts and they read the books and they go to therapy. And growth takes a long time. And it can be really exhausting to constantly be in the go, go, go of growing yourself. This podcast is to make you feel a little bit less alone. Like you can grow with friends and you can slow down and enjoy the ride. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but you can enjoy the ride. I actually wrote so much of this at 11 p.m. at night because I got so into what I wanted to say and my mission. And really, I've had this realization that that's the opposite vibe that I want for this podcast is perfection. So this podcast will not be perfect. I'm going to put a disclaimer here. We're going to just try some things out. And we're just going to be present. A small disclaimer. This podcast is not therapy. If you are one of my clients watching this or listening to this, I might share some things about clients or what I see. Most likely, it's not about you. And I'm going to be changing names and situations. I see a lot of similar things pop up over and over again. So mostly the examples I'm using is a conglomeration of several different situations or clients, either that I've heard of or that I've seen. So most likely, anything I share on this podcast has nothing to do with you. It's time to take off the cardigans. Get comfortable because I am off the clock.